from their libraries.
Why?
I don't know the official reason. My guess is from the English teacher standpoint. My guess is because since it's like her writing in her journal and telling the story, bad grammar. Plus, also she like kind of doesn't pick fights, but is the antagonizer. So young little Asia might read too many Junie B. Jones and then turn into the disruptive child.
I read every
I think Dumb Bunny is the last one that we were reading.
Oh.
Dumb Bunny, Dumb Bunny, Dumb Bunny. All right, what is on the board actually looks different from what is in your course syllabus because before I started grading the essays, I was making some changes. So this was not reactionary to me having read essays or anything. But you'll see, and I'll probably give you a paper copy of this like next week or so because I just want to like finalize a couple things and make sure I'm good with it. But I tweaked some percentages a little bit. So like off the top of my head, I think before a 5 was an 84, now it's an 85. Down here were more some changes. I think that was like this was like a 77 or whatever, so I switched it up to a 78 because I thought you should be able to get a C plus to go along with it. Over here in the 3s and 2 area was really where most of the changes were taking place as these percentages were kind of moving around a little bit. So what happens is just about all the essay assignments that we do, I'm going to use this scale, this rubric for. On the back of your prompt, the Heart of Darkness prompt, on the back of that prompt is the rubric. It's a 6-point rubric. It's rhetorical analysis. It's not a Mr. Kane rubric. It is what they are now using for AP exam rubric. All right. So, in perfect world, you write essays. I don't grade them, but I score them and pass them back. So you get a 4 and we work on some things, you get a 3, we work on some things, you get a 6 and you feel wonderful and I'm proud of you and we high five and all this kind of stuff goes on throughout the course of the year. But we practice essays and we score them over and over and over again. I don't think we live in a perfect world. It's not your fault. If there's not grades associated with assignments, generally the effort and time just isn't quite there the same for Paige, or Grace, or that Grace, or Diana, or whether she's Wonder Woman of the Amazon, or whatever. So we kind of have to have percentages attached to them, all right? Just the way that things are. The percentages up here, those are a Mr. Kane thing, and that's why they fluctuate. So there's not any rule saying, okay, if it gets a 3, it should get a 66% or whatnot. That's stuff that I kind of have coming up with and will continue to tweak probably a little bit throughout the year. I'm not going to say this is the only time it will be updated. These minuses and these pluses are also a Mr. Kane thing, which I'll explain to you how that kind of works into the scoring. But essentially, as you do writing assignments, if I'm giving it a score of a 4, that's me going that I think an AP College Board exam reader is going to score your essay as a 4. And honestly, the best, I shouldn't say predictor, but the best replication of you doing the AP exam are the TWAs. The first TWA, I always have it as a surprise. So it wasn't because of anything you did, nor was it because of anything you did not do correctly or right. You may not agree with this, which is fine. I feel like the first one, people tend to do better when they don't know it's coming. Now, after first period, word tends to pass and you kind of start to know that it's coming. Then 7th period came in with their heads down because they knew what was going to happen, as they were picking stuff up. But I feel like if you know that you're going to have an in-class essay the first time through, kind of psych yourself out for it, before it ever actually kind of begins. I'm not going to promise that that's the only time that's ever going to happen, and I'm not thinking of because I know in October or November or December this is the next one that we're going to do, but I don't want to make the pinky swear promise that you'll never do this again, and then I break it and Daniel gets mad at me, come February or March or anything like that. But it's definitely an atypical type thing. The next time you do an in-class writing, you will definitely know about it, coming in advance and whatnot. So don't read too much into it as, I don't like you anymore. Because that would be assuming I did, Grace, like you at one time. You can call me Mr. Scary. It's better than Mrs. So the the in-class essays that we do are the best kind of replication of this because you're going to do 3 essays on an AP exam in 2 hours. That's 120 minutes. You divide that by 3, that's 1 essay for every 40 minutes. You got 40 minutes to write an essay in here. But all writing assignments that we do, I'll still use this. So your East of Eden essay, while you're spending well more than 40 minutes on it, it's still going to get scored with this. So while right now still kind of shaky about it, and at the end of the period still probably some shaky and confused about it, we'll start to be more familiar with, well, what are the things, the characteristics that tend to be in a 2, in a 6, in a 4 kind of essay. But understand that an in-class essay and take-home essays are apples and oranges, both by me and certainly like how an AP exam would go. On an AP exam, it's not expected that you're writing a final copy. They know that it's a rough draft. Now the hope is that it's well crafted and thought out and executed and whatnot, but it is still a draft. So if Stella misspells definitely, that doesn't mean all of a sudden that 6 became a 2 or anything like that. It's understood that on an AP exam and on a TWA, if you had the opportunity to edit and have more time, you'd probably make some changes and take advantage of it. But at the same time, it's looking to see within this condensed amount of time, what were you able to kind of get, all right? So on the back of your prompt where you see the rubric, this is new for this year. I mentioned earlier in the year that it used to be you would just get a 1-number score and it was holistic. So you didn't really know why you got a 7 or why you got an 8 or why you got a 6. You might be able to figure it out, but it wasn't broken down. Now you have a rubric which breaks down for you how your score came about. So you very well could have a check mark here, you could have a check mark here, and then down at the bottom have a check mark here. A 1 plus a 3 plus a 1 would give you a grand score of a 5. So that's me going AP exam quality. They're probably taking a look at it as a 5. That means in the grade book, that 5 should be showing up as an 85%. In the grade book, it looks like all of your essays are worth 100 points. They're not. I put all of your essays in so it looks like 100 points so that I can punch in the percentages without having to do funky math. So if you get a 6 minus and it's a 50-point essay, it's going to show up as a 92 instead of a 46 or something like that, because I want you to be able to just kind of remember what those things are. So the follow-up question becomes, well, I didn't even think we were going to go that far yet. How many points is your essay? I mean, the assignment that you actually have in front of you, what is this worth? Because the crappy thing right now, it's worth half your grade. Or the really good thing, depending on the score, it's worth half your grade. Because all of your essays combined will make up 50%. But this one that you did right now, this one's worth 40 points. The East of Eden essays, not rough drafts, but final copies, are going to be worth 60 points. And here's how it works. If we do a TWA about a book or a text that we are reading, TWA, timed writing assignment, what you literally just did on Tuesday. If it's a TWA about a book, 40 points. If it is a take-home essay, generally about a book, but sometimes not. But if it's a take-home essay where there's editing and whatnot taking place, more emphasis gets placed on it, 60 points. These are the ones where you can lose points for to-be verbs. I'm never going to be at the point where you're losing points for is and stuff like that. Now, for your TWA, some of you, I might have circled shows or showed quite a bit. And in some ways, it wasn't me being like, you stupid idiot, and circling them. But if you had 4 shows in like 3 lines, you probably should be aware that there is any word that you are using that often. And right now, it just kind of tends to be shows or whatnot. So I might have circled it just to let you know that it's there. Another type of essay that we do is going to be a TWA, but that's where it'll be an AP prompt, so it is not literature-based, but we might just do, hey, we're going to do a practice rhetorical analysis, next Friday. I'm making this up. So you could get a presidential speech from John F. Kennedy in 1963, and you would analyze the rhetorical devices. If we do a TWA that's an AP exam prompt, but not literature-based with what we're doing, that one ends up being 30 points. So those are the typical ones. If it's something that goes home, it's usually going to be worth more than something that we work on in class. So when you get your scores for East of Eden, In Power School, they'll look like 100 points, just like your Heart of Darkness one looks like 100 points, but you can't add the 3 up and divide, and that's your average, because these technically are worth more and all that stuff. And if you ever need to see your averages, it shows up on my end. It does not show up on your end, which I think is too bad.
I just had a question about like the 2B verbs
Yep.
and the take-home essays. So are we allowed to use them like at all, or just like you said like we could use them in the intro conclusion, but like can we use them like?
You can't use them in intro, you can't use them in conclusion, and then you remember the 2 places in the body paragraphs? The first and last sentences, okay? So you can have them in other places. And I still might mark them,
Okay.
you know, like if you do fall into an issue where like is getting used, you know, habitually, just so you're aware of it. Because a lot of times when we're writing, we don't even pick up on, you know, some of the words that we're using. But intro, conclusion, first, last sentence, and other places that it's at. You're never going to have the assignment where, Tori, you can't use them anymore, they're gone. You know, but always intro, conclusion, first, last sentence. If, and since you're talking about pluses, minuses, and all that kind of stuff, if on, since you brought up, we'll say Hannah's, on Hannah's East of Eden essay, on the rubric, you get a 5+, okay? So it would go into the grade book as an 88%, but you had 8 to-be verbs. Those are each going to be a half point, so your 88 becomes an 84%. So on take-home essays, which, you know, isn't on here, but it would be taking that AP score and then doing a to-be verb deduction. Or if Maddie forgot to have a works cited page, you know, that could be still going to grade the essay as is, but there would be deduction for not having that. So there will be some, actually, Turnitin doesn't let me do half points, I don't think. They haven't in the past. Maybe this year they will. But in theory, you could have an 84.5. Which I would just round up to an 85, you know, at that point. But the points for the to-be verbs would come off of whatever that AP score thing kind of is. All right. So now, Maddie, do your thing about pluses and minuses. All right. So for someone, I know you can't read it, but we can see at least where the checks are. So check for thesis, got 3 points for the evidence, the content, and then 1 point for that sophistication, so you get a 5. Some folks might have something where it looks like this, plus sign in the 3, all right? If you have a plus sign, that's me going, it's still a 3. So I'm pretty sure that an AP score would still give you 3 points for that commentary part. However, that's a strong 3. You're like knocking on the door of a 4. You're not there yet, but it is a strong 3. So, hey, your 3 is better than my 3. You therefore get the plus, and now you get a little bit higher score than what I do, even though I still think they would both be 5s. Conversely, and this is the part that I think where some folks can kind of get a little confused because it just looks odd. Say you got a minus. It's not that you really messed up, because it's still in that room of 3, you know, but it's a weaker 3. It's closer to getting into that 2 territory where it's starting to get some of those characteristics, but there's enough of it that it's still going to be a 3. If you have a minus there, then that 5 is going to become a 5 minus. If this one's a minus and this one is a plus, they canceled each other out, so you would still have a 5. If a person has a plus here, has a plus here, has a plus here, we're not doing 5 plus plus plus, nor 4 minus minus minus, because at that point we're getting a little too convoluted. But you know, if you had plus, minus, plus, that'd still be a 5 plus, because the sophistication and the thesis are getting strong. All right. Doesn't mean necessarily we understand what is going to warrant a plus or a minus, but that's at least how the math part works. If, you know, Stella notices, hey, I got 2 pluses, but you didn't give me the plus on my score, that's something you want to show to me. And I go, oh yeah, that's right. Or, no, that looks like your handwriting. Why did you erase what I wrote before? You know, so that you're not taking that minus sign and putting a plus on it. I did add the Brady clause. Not really.
I don't know, what is that?
Right. It's actually not the Brady clause. I just felt like
Oh.
name dropping in
I
there.
felt like I was supposed for a second.
I know. Oops, I don't want full screen. On the knowing that this is something that rubric that's going to get used for your like East of Eden essays or any kind of take-home essays. Some folks start to get a little devious and try to beat the system. Not that Brady, you would ever do anything like that. But according to your writing scale, what would a 1 get you? You'd get a 30%. Not that Ryan is going to get all excited for a 30%. Usually we're not jumping up and down for it. How could you get a 1 on an essay? By doing the least amount of work. And again, not recommended. Well, no, I mean like what would be the least amount of content? We're going to go same thing. Yeah, if you have a thesis statement, according to the AP scale, you get a 1. Because, you know, over here, responds to the prompt with a defensible thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices. So as long as you were to mention that, you know, Conrad uses imagery and personification to characterize Kurtz, you should get a 1. I don't want Brady or anyone else. Steinbeck utilizes demonic diction, metaphor, and simile to illustrate the struggles, you know, that Adam experiences, but it still positively shapes him. Submit. At least I'll get a 30% if I deem, and especially for take-home essays, there's not enough content, it's just going to be unscorable. So don't do that. Not that I think you would, but you know, you come across a lot of people over the years, and that would be, you know, not an escape clause that we would utilize. All right, but literally, if you have a thesis statement, you get a point. It's not a bad deal. Some of you could be going, well, why did I get a check, or why did I get a plus, or why did I get a minus when it came to thesis statement? Here's what I was taking a look at here. If probably the most common thesis statement, and I don't mean by devices, but I just mean overall wording, probably the most common thesis statement was something along the lines of imagery and personification. Marlowe uses imagery and personification to characterize Kurtz. If you did that, I gave you a check. If you were to go something like imagery and personification characterize Kurtz as an evil demigod among the, you know, savages of Africa, because your argument now became specific and you specified what the characterization was, you would have gotten a plus. You should have received a plus. If you did something like diction and figurative language characterize Kurtz, you still have a thesis statement, but that would have been a minus. Why? Diction and figurative language. It's too broad, and then you throw on diction as not having a specific type. There just wasn't, there. You still had a thesis, but it wasn't specific enough to truly be like a defensible claim to get like the full credit. But on like back to the pluses and minuses, if you were to say figurative language and diction are right, you know, characterize Kurtz, that would still count as a thesis, but it just to me does not warrant the same score as what a more specific one would end up being. Douglas, did you have a question? No? Okay. So that's kind of like how those pluses and minuses start to come in. As an AP teacher dealing with this prompt for the first time, the category that I'm most curious about is the sophistication one. What I don't think it is going to be is meaning using fancy words. So those of you that have, you know, Mrs. Burns for language enrichment and whatnot, that doesn't mean you need to go through your old list 1 through 20 and start dropping in all these fancy words and whatnot. For me, sophistication is going to mean like the argument itself, the structure of it. So utilization of transitions, organization of body paragraphs, that they would be like parallel for the most point, and things like that. It doesn't mean, you know, necessarily just fancy words, compound complex sentences, semicolons and dashes all over the place. Certainly those things might, you know, kind of play a part into it if it's done well, but I would think of it as more of the structure of the argument, the presentation of the argument, as opposed to the fancy words that get dropped. But part of me wonders, is this going to be the unicorn point? You know, it's out there, but we never see it. If Daniel were to go, can you show me an essay that got a 1 and an essay that didn't get a 1 for sophistication on the AP exam? I have to sadly go, no, because we haven't gotten anything that would, that would clearly identify this is something that got it, this is something that didn't. I think we could probably go, that one earned it, that one didn't, but there's not a clear cut at this point, bank of examples that I can show you because I just haven't used it yet. But I don't think it will have anything, or primarily have to do with literally the word choice that you use. Now, if, on your East of Eden essay, to be verbs are problematic, a lot of dead words are getting utilized, it's all simple sentences over and over again, I think it could kind of drop, at that point, whether it be going from a 1 to a 0 or a check to a minus, would certainly kind of play into it. But I don't think for like an in-class essay, it's going to be relying solely on did you use a thesaurus, in your head. So as you're typing your essays, I don't want you highlighting words and looking up the synonyms that Google Docs gives you or anything like that, because at that one, it's not going to really be what you would naturally write anyway. Same thing for like the evidence part, the content and whatnot. How many examples do you need to have in your body paragraphs? For East of Eden, you gotta have 3, you gotta have at least 2 quotes. So, if Stella only has 2 examples in each of her body paragraphs, technically those examples, according to the AP rubric, very well could be providing commentary that's engaging in detail the text and drawing conclusions about the rhetorical devices, but you didn't meet the requirement that we were already talking about, so you're not going to be eligible really for that 4 or for that 3. If it's still going well, it's probably going to be more in that 2 range. A passing essay would be considered a 4 or higher. So 4 or higher on an EP exam would be considered an essay. What you don't want to do at this point is look at this one essay as being indicative of where you are and will be throughout the course of the year, because that's just simply not fair to yourself. There's so many different types of essays that we'll do, so many prompts, so many, just different factors that are going to play in. The hope is that you hone those skills and you get a little bit more aware and improve, whether you're doing well on the first one or one that you think you got some room for improvement. But if you got a 6, that certainly doesn't mean everything from here on out is probably going to be 6s, nor would it be if you got a 3, everything from here on out is going to be 3. There's going to be kind of like some ups and downs that probably go along with it. I like the rubric because it does kind of give you a breakdown, but at the same time, I also kind of go, good writing is good writing, so it'll kind of work out. Grade standpoint, I usually like it when essays average around an 80%. Not saying I limit them to an 80%, but they're around 80%. I usually feel like, okay, people are getting the hang of it, and that's right where we were for this one. So it's not something where we got a lot of things to go over here, Stella. As class, we're pretty much where we should be. Any general questions or specific questions? It's a lot to take in for one day. As we use it more, talk about it more, look at it more, I think we'll become more comfortable with what it's looking for. And even like, in years past, people will go, what are you really looking for in an essay? And I always said a focused argument, it's well supported, and the ability to write. And I feel good about saying that because the rubric that they have pretty much means if you have a thesis statement, you should have a focused argument. There's definitely a lot of emphasis placed on support. And if you have the ability to write, that sophistication is going to be there. So, those categories I think are still valid.
You said the plus and minus is your own personal thing. Like that's not how AP graders are going to.
Right. They'll go. That's for
They'll go like
I would
that's
say
a 5
as a whole. Right. But like that's a 1 for sophistication, or that's a 0. That's a 3. That's a 4. They're not going to kind of go. Was that a strong 4 or a weak 4? It's still a 4.
Okay.
Since we do attach grades to it, if your 4 is better than Sasha's 4, there should be something that kind of goes along with it, or vice versa. And also, that would mean that for an essay, we could only have 6 grades, which doesn't give us the whole. And you can still argue, well, we only have 18. But it's kind of hard to go. All right, you get 100%, or you're going to get a B. So it just gives me some flexibility with it. In theory, we could maybe go 6 double plus 6, but I think that's also going to kind of start to get overly complicated at that point. Looking at the actual, text itself, doesn't mean that you necessarily wrote about it, but what were devices that you were noticing? What were things that you recognized?
Allow for self-protection.
All right. Where at?
Was it like started at line
Yeah, pretty much like right away. Like 3 to 9, I think was where most people were pulling it from. So wilderness, patted him on the head, caressed him, had taken him, loved him, embraced him, got into his veins, consumed his flesh, sealed his soul, and all that kind of stuff. I think personification and imagery were probably the most popular ones. I'm not certainly going to go, let's say everyone in here uses personification, which did not happen. I read yours first and go, wow, nice job. I read Abby's last, I am sick of personification. Everyone is writing about it. That doesn't mean her score goes down. If the device is there and it's being explained, it is valid. So, in theory, everyone could use the same too. That never happens, unless that whole plagiarism thing that you brought up earlier was occurring. But you're not going to get punished for using something that someone else did. All right, what else? Personification, big one, popular one. Okay. Just gonna write hers over here to remind us what we got. What else did we see? Grace, what was one that you went with?
I said imagery with like all of his like talking about the devil, but it also could be like demonic fiction.
And honestly, like with here too, the part that Maddie was mentioning, you did have people going with imagery, with the describing of ivory ball and head and all that kind of stuff. So which like specific lines were you taking a look at?
I talked about.
Are you down around 30?
Yeah, I had.
Like 30, we got powers of darkness amongst
Yeah.
the devils of the land.
Yeah,
34.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had it there.
Okay. Yeah. So imagery, and some people certainly were kind of going diction there. How's he being characterized? Like specifically with those, how's he being characterized? If that darkness is being associated with it, and whether you can answer anyone else.
I mean, it's just he's being characterized as like evil as bad. I mean, I don't think. I mean, when you're being compared to like the devil or anything like dark, I mean, he just doesn't characterize you well.
Yeah, it's usually not good. So if that thesis statement goes, whatever in imagery characterized Kurtz, as an evil force, that's going to be more specific than he uses imagery to characterize him. Still might be the same examples, and honestly, the analysis still might be equally as solid. But if you start off with, characterize him as fill in the blank, there's a better chance of you having a consistent argument the whole way through. And not purposely going with these, but if he is becoming devilish and dark and evil, what would we say is happening to his humanity? It's going away, which is kind of funny because based on your example, what's being personified? The wilderness. The wilderness is like sucking his humanity away, and he's withering away into this kind of shell of a human. So you can, kind of play one device off of another, and it's a difficult thing to do. It's not going, how dare you not have done this? But as we do more of this, you'll kind of start to see what some connections would be. Syntax was a popular thing, specifically repetition. What word were they probably looking at? And you could have had like repetition of devilish diction, too, with powers of darkness and whatnot. But what word's kind of going on here around lines 23, 24? Just like the kid in the candy store, we got that mine. What does that emphasize? Grace?
He's like, it's just like all about him.
Okay. Egotistical, greedy,
Self-entitled.
self-entitled. Did you have something to throw in? It's his, okay, and it's both like the concrete as well as the abstract. Like, I don't know if anyone in here actually owns a river. My river, you know, my ivory. If you are being dehumanized, if you are dehumanizing, or you are being dehumanized, you start to, maybe rules don't apply to you anymore as you're trying to elevate your egotistical nature. Those explanations of kind of digging a little bit deeper is where that commentary and analysis score starts to creep up from that 2 and 3 into that 4 kind of land, where you're now taking ideas and you're providing insight that wouldn't necessarily be there the first time something gets read. One part that a lot of folks like to look at for details was right around here. What do we know about his growing up? So he's educated in England. What do we know about family? We have half English, half French. Kurtz. What's the name? What would be the ethnicity of the name Kurtz? Doesn't say. Well, what would the name be? Be German. So Kurtz is really an embodiment of
All the imperial powers.
all the imperial powers. So now you can take a look at some symbolic value and things like that. So that's where you're getting insight that wouldn't necessarily be provided right by the passage. These folders, if you want to take it home and take a look at it some more, you certainly can. If not, just drop it off in the bin where you pick up the grid folders, and they'll always be You can. If you want to look at it, just bring it back. It'll always be in the house. But you don't have to like sign it out, you know, any day to use it. That would be ridiculous.